Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sunny's Mindset Lab. This is the place where we explore powerful ideas, life-changing perspectives, and deep concepts designed to help you think better, live better, and grow better. Today, we're getting into an explainer that, honestly, it completely shook up how I view the past. We're looking at a deeply thought-provoking source that fundamentally challenges the traditional narratives of Indian history. You know, the stuff we were all taught in school. Instead of just accepting history exacting as it's handed to us, we're going to peel back the layers and really examine the underlying psychology and hidden strategies of the era exactly as presented in this material. So, get comfortable, keep an open mind, and let's dive into this.
Starting right at the foundation of the freedom struggle, the source material asks a really provocative question, one you've probably never considered. Who actually brought Mahatma Gandhi back to India from South Africa? We usually picture this organic, inevitable return of a hero, right? Well, the text suggests something wild, that the British essentially facilitated it. Think about it. They were fighting World War I, they desperately needed Indian troops, and to get that, they needed a non-combative figurehead to rally support. According to the source, Gandhi, who had actually served as an ambulance driver for the British back in the Boer War, fit that strategic requirement perfectly. And this idea of British curation, the source applies it right to the very origins of the Indian National Congress. Traditionally, we view the Congress as this organic uprising of brilliant Indian minds fighting for freedom. But the source highlights that it was actually initiated by a British officer, A.O. Hume. The documents analyzed here outline what they call a pressure cooker theory. The British saw all this emotional dissent bubbling up across India, and they allegedly created a release valve, the Congress Party itself. The argument is that this was a deliberate tactic to gather all the intellectual dissenters into one highly predictable space where they could be easily monitored and managed. It's almost like building a sandbox so you know exactly where everyone is playing.
Following that logic, the analyzed documents claim by Gandhi's public image was also deeply, deliberately curated. The source points to a 1939 Gazette that effectively mandated the media to use the prefix Mahatma when talking about him. And since the British completely controlled the newspapers and the radio at that time, the source argues they could just constantly amplify his name. They granted him exclusive access to the viceroy, deliberately drowning out other, more radical voices. They needed a manageable, non-violent leader at the forefront so they could, control the entire narrative of the rebellion.
This completely reevaluates iconic moments too, like the Dandi Salt March. Instead of a massive, defiant breaking of British law, the text views it through the lens of a highly curated PR event. The argument here is simple but striking. If a global colonial superpower truly wanted to stop a slow, weeks-long march across the country, they literally could have just made arrests on day one, right? Instead, the source argues they allowed the photographs and the spectacle to happen because it reinforced Gandhi's image as the sole leader of the masses, which kept the actual resistance totally predictable and nonviolent. So, fast-forwarding to the dawn of independence in 1946, this explainer delves into something highly controversial: the internal election for the very first prime minister of an independent India. Now, it's pretty naturally assumed that the first prime minister was just the undisputed choice of the people, but the source focuses closely on a specific internal vote held among 15 provincial Congress committees. This was the vote meant to decide who would lead the party and, essentially, the new nation.
And the numbers here are fascinating. Out of those 15 provincial votes, the historical records highlighted by the source show that Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel received an overwhelming 12 votes. 2 went to Acharya Kripalani. So, by the actual democratic metrics of the party's will, the source notes that Sardar Patel was the clear, undeniable choice to be the first prime minister. He was absolutely the man the provinces trusted.
But here's the wild part. In stark contrast, Jawaharlal Nehru received absolutely 0 votes from those provincial committees. 0. Yet, as we know, he became the prime minister. How? Well, according to the historical records analyzed in the text, Gandhi directly intervened. He convinced Kripalani to withdraw, and then he asked Patel, the clear winner, to step down. And Patel, out of immense respect, surrendered his mandate, effectively handing the absolute top position over to Nehru. The research also brings up this incredible alternative perspective on who the nation's true first leader was, suggesting that conceptually it might actually be Subhash Chandra Bose, or Netaji. Years before 1947, specifically in October of 1943, the text highlights that Bose had already declared the Azad Hind government in exile. He literally had an active army of up to 85,000 personnel, he had his own currency, a functioning bank, and get this, official recognition from up to 11 independent nations. So, practically speaking, the source argues that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was, in many ways, truly India's first prime minister.
Section 1. Conflicts and Leadership Failures.
Now, tracing the turbulent events of the 1947 Kashmir conflict, the source outlines that when Pakistan-backed forces invaded, Nehru was actually hesitant to deploy the Indian army. According to the accounts cited here, it was Sardar Patel who forcefully intervened to compel the deployment of troops. The text then claims that just as the Indian army was successfully pushing the invaders back, the leadership made a decision to unilaterally stop the war. By taking the matter to the UN prematurely, the source argues this was a catastrophic administrative delay that ultimately cost India a third of the region. Then, the source uses this incredibly striking quote to describe the tragic 1962 Sino-Indian War. An army of tigers led by a sheep. It's a heavy analogy, but it's used by the author to argue that the Indian soldiers, the tigers, were phenomenal. They were incredibly brave. But they were ultimately let down by a political leadership that completely lacked military understanding and strategic foresight. Detailing some of the specific logistical blunders during that 1962 war, the text alleges that troops were sent up to freezing altitudes in the Himalayas, literally wearing summer clothing. No proper winter gear, no solid supply lines. Furthermore, the source highlights a shocking moment where the leadership, reportedly panicking at the Chinese advance, actually ordered Indian Air Force personnel in Assam to burn their own aircraft to prevent them from being captured. The source views this and the unilateral peace declaration shortly after as a profound, heartbreaking failure of leadership. This explainer then pivots to what has to be one of history's greatest mysteries. Did Subhash Chandra Bose really die in a plane crash in Taiwan back in 1945? The source deeply questions this official narrative, pointing out a glaring lack of actual crash records from Taiwan at that specific time. The text suggests that the plane crash might have just been a convenient story, one accepted by both the British and the newly forming Indian political class, to whom his sudden return would have been, well, highly inconvenient. Instead, the alternative path outlined by the research suggests that Bose actually escaped to Russia, where he was allegedly placed in a Siberian gulag. Years later, according to declassified glimpses and witness accounts cited in the text, he supposedly returned to India to live out his life under strict quiet surveillance as an ascetic known as Gunami Baba in Uttar Pradesh. And to back this up, the source points out that post-independence Indian intelligence heavily surveilled Bose's family for decades, behavior the author argues makes absolutely no sense if they truly believed he died in 1945. Section 2, Philosophy and Dharma. Moving away from the historical critique, the source actually concludes with a deeply reflective message on life philosophy, specifically defining the concept of dharma. Dharma is described here as righteous living, essentially ensuring your actions are totally honest and that you aren't exploiting anyone around you. The text suggests that by living according to dharma and just doing your absolute best in any given situation, you completely remove the heavy burden of regret. If you know in your heart you did the right thing, you can trust karma to handle the rest. The source then poses this incredibly powerful mind shift. If things are happening only after you die, then why are you living today? Wow, it serves as this beautiful reminder to be deeply present. Rather than just enduring life and waiting for some cosmic reward in an afterlife, this philosophy teaches that heaven and hell are meant to be experienced right here, right now, purely through the consequences of our actions. It's a profound call to act righteously today. As we wrap up this explainer here on Sunny's Mindset Lab, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to really reflect on long after we're done here. How is history actually recorded? And who truly gets to tell it? When you're reading a textbook, are you reading the absolute objective truth, or are you just reading the carefully crafted narrative of the victor? Thank you so much for exploring these deep concepts with me today. Keep asking the hard questions, keep cultivating a mindset that seeks the deeper layers of truth, and as always, keep growing. Catch you next time.